Uh, Hello, everyone. Welcome again to another edition of Storytime with Robbie. Hope you're all staying well and having a fabulous day so far. Today we are continuing with the winter themed books. This is the last batch of them. And so today I'm going to be reading you something that you may have during the winter, especially you might have this during Christmas time. Gingerbread Baby by Jan Brett. And here's something else that you might have at this time of year. Especially in the winter, maybe even at Christmas time. Marshmallows for Martians by Adam and Charlotte Gillian. And here's a winter-themed character called a Yeti, and this story is called The Thing About Yetis by Vingel. And I will be reading you another story about a Yeti, Spaghetti with the Yeti by Adam and Charlotte Gillian. Hope you enjoy. Let's get started. Alrighty, everybody. The first wintry themed book I'm going to read you today is something that you may have at Christmas or something that you might even have during the winter. Is a gingerbread cookie, and this is a story about a gingerbread man or a baby. It's called Gingerbread Baby by Jan Brett. Here we go. It was cold outside. It was warm inside. A fine day for gingerbread, Maddie thought. Maddie's mother put the big bowl on the table and lit the stove. Maddie took down a worn-looking cookbook with an old-fashioned writing on the cover. He opened it up to the page that said, Gingerbread Boy. They measured and mixed. Maddie rolled the dough into the shape of a gingerbread boy. They popped him in the oven. Bake a full 8 minutes. No more, no less. Do not peek, the recipe read. Maddie listened to the clock. Tick, tock, tick. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3, 4, 5. Maddie couldn't wait any longer. He opened the oven door to take a peek. Instead of a gingerbread boy, out jumped a gingerbread baby. He pranced around the big blue bowl. I'm the gingerbread baby, fresh from the pan. If you want me, catch me if you can. Maddie's mother reached for the gingerbread baby to put him back into the oven, but he ran all around the kitchen. The door opened and in came Maddie's father. What's that delicious smell? He asked as the gingerbread baby tumbled through his legs and outside into the yard. He ran by the tabby cat. She twitched her tail and sprang at him. They rumbled and tumbled, but the gingerbread baby came out on top. He ran toward the garden wall. The dog caught a whiff of tasty ginger and sniffed along behind him, but the gingerbread baby was halfway up when the dog caught up. He barked and barked as the gingerbread baby climbed over the wall. Maddie was still inside. He heard his mother and father yelling. He heard a cat meowing and a dog barking. And he heard the gingerbread baby shouting, "Catch me if you can!" Maddie opened up the worn-looking cookbook for the second time. Meanwhile, the gingerbread baby wheeled on down the path and into the barn. The goats looked up as the somersaulted across their backs. As he somersaulted across their backs. The last one tried to catch him, but the gingerbread baby was too fast. Martha and Madeline were standing by the well when the gingerbread baby stopped to take a drink. They looked at each other and winked. Martha started to talk to him, while Madeline tiptoed up behind him with the bucket, but they couldn't fool that gingerbread baby. He took a braid from Martha and a braid from Madeline and tied them in a knot and ran down the road. Back in the house, Maddie stirred, mixed, and rolled the dough. He shaped it, put it in a pan and into the oven. Tick, tock, tick. 8 long minutes. This time he didn't peek. "I'll catch him if I can," Maddie said to himself. As he was bouncing along, the gingerbread baby saw a farm wagon just ahead. He jumped in and settled down for the ride next to a mama pig. The smell of gingerbread was too much for her. She tossed him high in the air, closed her eyes, and opened her mouth. But the gingerbread baby twisted in the air and came down hard on her porky snout. "I am the gingerbread baby, too quick for the mother and the father, too fast for the cat, the dog, the goats, too clever for Martha and Madeline, too smart for the mama pig. Who's left? Catch me if you can." Feeling smug, the gingerbread baby strolled along by himself until he came to a bridge that crossed over to the village. Just as he got to the middle, he heard running feet behind him and saw a crowd of villagers ahead of him. The gingerbread baby was trapped. He jumped up on the railing, backflipped through the air, and landed on a chunk of ice floating down the river. The ice bobbed along with the gingerbread baby, dancing on top and singing in a loud voice, "Look at me, and what do you see? The best gingerbread baby ever," until his feet got cold and he jumped as horror. Who was that watching from the trees? It was the fox. He crept up behind the gingerbread baby, ready to eat him up. But the fox couldn't help himself, and he licked his chops, smack, smack. The gingerbread baby heard him and ran as fast as he could. Just when the fox was catching up, the gingerbread baby saw the milk and cheese man with his can of milk. The perfect hiding place, he thought. He lifted the lid and lowered himself inside. He was so pleased that he sang at the top of his gingerbread voice, "Ha, ha, he, you'll never find me. I'm the gingerbread baby. Catch me if you can." The milk and the cheese man heard the gingerbread baby's voice. "Who's meddling with my milk?" he shouted and lifted the lid. But the gingerbread baby was ready. He jumped up and tweaked his nose. Now the milk and cheese man, the fox, the villagers, the mama pig, Martha and Madeline, the bleeding goats, the barking dog, the meowing cat, the father and the mother were all after the gingerbread baby and getting closer, and he knew it. The brash baby was not as peppy and proud as he had been. He sniffed a familiar smell and followed his nose into the woods. He couldn't believe what he saw. There in the middle of a clearing was a gingerbread house, frosted with sugar, covered with candy, and doors with peppermint handles wide open. The gingerbread baby clapped his hands with glee and ran inside. In a tick-tock-tick, everyone arrived in the clearing, but all they found were a few bits of frosting, a peppermint candy, and some crumbs. The father exclaimed, "The gingerbread baby has finally met his match. I wonder who it was," the mother said. "Let's go home and tell Maddie." "Hello, Maddie," his father said when they got home. "We never did catch the gingerbread baby. All we found were some crumbs in the snow." "I see you have been busy," his mother said, looking at the gingerbread house Maddie was holding. "Too bad we never caught the gingerbread baby." "Too bad," said Maddie. Only Maddie could hear the teeny voice from inside the gingerbread house. "I'm the little gingerbread baby, lucky as can be to be living in the house that Maddie made for me." The end. Alrighty, everybody. The second wintry themed book I'm going to read you today is something that you may, that I'm sure you have during the winter. Marshmallows for Martians by Adam and Charlotte Gillian. Here we go. A boy called George had a marvelous idea. One night as he gazed at the stars, "I'll go and find out what sweets Martians like best." So he planned his first mission to Mars. So George built a rocket and packed up his bag with a star map and plenty of treats, the bag full to bursting. He threw out his lunch so he'd have enough room for his sweets. Made by George, spaceship G101, radio receiver, telescope, start battery, special panels, super torch, bag hook, front door. He packed lollipops, toffees, and chocolate drops. He took chews with a sharp lemon zest. There were gobstoppers, jelly beans, humbugs, and mints, and marshmallows his absolute best. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, blast off! As George blasted off and zoomed up into space, he looked at his map of the stars. He checked out the window and steered to the left and set his course straight towards Mars. Past satellites, comets, and drifting space junk, George steered without even a bump. Then he finally saw the red planet appear and landed on Mars with a thump. George opened the door in a cloud of red dust. He jumped out and looked all around. At first, he saw no signs of alien life, but he could hear a very loud sound. George followed the noise to the top of a rock and peered down on an alien parade. Their outfits were shocking, but far worse than that were the yodeling yells that they made. "Excuse me," said George as he jumped from the rock. "Are you Martians?" he asked with a smile. "We're yodelers from Yodel," their leader replied, "and we've not had a snack for a while." So George gave the yodelers some treats that he brought. They gave all the lolies a lick. Then they gobbled the jelly beans up in a flash until they began to feel sick. "What have you done to our tummies?" they roared. "I'm terribly sorry," George said, "but maybe you won't be so greedy next time." Then he picked up his sweets and he fled. George hid in a crater, but soon heard a bang like the clashing of a very loud drums. He peeked out and spotted an alien band with cymbals attached to their bums. "Are you Martians?" called George, running up with a grin. "No, we're Bang Bots from Wah Bang 2. We've come to this planet to bang on our drums, but we might take a break and eat you." "You won't want to eat me," said George with a gulp. "These sweets are much tastier, you'll see." The Bang Bots crammed gobstoppers in their mouths and chewed on the toffee with glee. But the Bang Bots soon found that their teeth were stuck tight, and they howled and they roared in dismay. Then they started to bang on their cymbals in rage as George turned and scrambled away. His sweets were almost gone. George slumped to the ground. "I give up. The Martians have gone. There are too many visitors making a noise." But just then, George heard a sweet song. And suddenly, little green aliens popped up with short, stumpy legs and 3 eyes. They stomped towards George, looking grumpy and glum. They moaned and they wailed with great sighs. "Are you Martians?" gasped George. "Yes, we are," they replied, "and we fed and were fed up with alien musicians. They'd come to our planet and make such a din, and they never ask for permission." "Can you help us?" the Martians begged George in despair as rock band from Saturn drew near. But just as the sound of guitars filled the air, George had a brilliant idea. He picked up the bag with the last of his sweets and called to the Martians, "Come here!" Then he took the marshmallows and carefully pushed one soft sweet into each Martian ear. "Hooray!" cried the Martians. "We can't hear a thing. You've made it so peaceful. Yippee!" Then George jumped into his rocket and waved them goodbye as he zoomed back to Earth for his tea. The end. Alrighty, everybody. The third wintry themed book I'm going to read you today is a winter themed character called a Yeti. And this is a story about a Yeti called The Thing About Yetis by Vin Fogel. Here we go. The thing about Yetis is that Yetis love winter. They love waking up on a snowy and quiet mornings and drinking hot chocolate with their favorite stuffed toy. They love sliding down hills on their bottoms, building big snow castles, and pretending they are Godzilla. They love ice skating, Yeti style. Yetis make the best snowballs on the planet. Floops, and the best snowmen too. But sometimes winter can be tough. Swoosh! After all, Yetis get cold too. Really, really cold. And when their snowy fur finally dries, it gets a little poofy on those days when Yetis just can't get warm and the box of hot chocolate is empty. Yetis can't be downright crabby. So here's a little secret for you. The thing about Yetis is that sometimes they miss summer. They miss playing outside for hours and hours on long sunny days. They miss looking for little creatures by the sea and having sea monster beauty contests. Yetis miss building big sand castles and pretending they are Godzilla. They miss zipping down splashy slides on their bellies. They miss wishing on a shooting star, the glowing light show of hundreds of fireflies, and the sound of crickets on warm summer nights. The thing about Yetis is that Yetis love winter because on the very coldest, wettest, windiest winter days, Yetis know just what to do. They make the warmest, coziest, calmest summer day right at home. The end. Alrighty, everybody. The fourth wintry themed book I'm going to read you today is another story about a Yeti. This one is called Spaghetti with the Yeti by Adam and Charlotte Gillian. Here we go. A boy called George had an excellent plan to go and discover the Yeti. He put in his backpack a warm, woolly hat, a map, and a tin of spaghetti. Slowly, George climbed up a steep mountain path in search of the mythical beast when he stumbled straight into a monster who was eating a scrumptious feast. "Hooray!" shouted George. "I knew you'd be here. I'm sure that you must be the Yeti." The monster stood up with a furious gaze. "Are you crazy? My name is Betty." "So sorry, Betty," said George with a smile, "but I'm taking the Yeti some lunch. In that case, you'll want to take some of these bones for the Yeti. For the Yeti likes food with a crunch." So George climbed on up the steep mountain path to track down the hideaway brute when he stumbled upon a big monster with a face like a battered old boot. "Yippee!" shouted George. "I've tracked you down now. I've been searching so long for the Yeti." The monster glared down with the angriest growl. How insulting. My name is Hetty. So sorry, Hetty, said George with a sigh, but I'm taking the Yeti a treat. In that case, you'll want to take one of these goats, for the Yeti likes food with a bleat. So George trudged on up the steep mountain path, dragging the goat by her tail, when he spotted a shape in the distance and heard the most bone-chilling wail. "Hurrah!" shouted George. "At last it is you. I've been looking so hard for the Yeti." The monster looked down with a horrible howl. "Are you bonkers? My name is Nettie." "So sorry, Nettie," sighed George, feeling glum, "but I'm taking the Yeti a snack. In that case, you'll want to take lobsters and crabs, for the Yeti likes food he can crack." So George plodded on up the steep mountain path. The difficult climb made him puff. Exhausted, he threw himself down on the ground. "That's it," he cried. "I've had enough." As George sat despondent, his head in his hands, a shadow fell over that place. He felt something hairy, a prod in the back, and then he turned and peered up. Ah! A face! "I found you!" cried George with a big, hairy, happy grin, and he showed all his gifts to the Yeti. But the monster looked down at the crab and the goat and said, "Sorry, I just eat spaghetti." "I knew it," said George with a whoop of delight, and he opened the battered old tin. Then he tipped the spaghetti out into a bowl. And George and the Yeti tucked in slurp. The end. Alrighty, everybody. Really hope you enjoyed the wintry themed books today. Thank you so much again for joining me and for watching. Please comment on the video as always and let me know what you think of the picks. I always like to hear your feedback, and let me know what your favorite story was that I read today. Have a fabulous rest of your day, and I will see you here on the next edition of Story Time with Robbie. Until then, toodaloo.